Darin Ruf and Mike Yastrzemski have new deals with the Giants. We'll talk about the details and what these guys mean to the team next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, all season long. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can listen to this show wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, there's a lot I want to cover. First and foremost, today was the deadline for players and teams to exchange figures for arbitration. It's kind of like this boring legal talk almost, figuring out deadlines and contracts and all that. But the news of the hour is that Darin Ruf and Mike Yastrzemski agreed to new deals avoiding arbitration. And specifically for Ruff, it's an extension. It buys out the new deal buys out both arbitration years remaining this year and next year, and it also includes a club option for the year after that. So it has the potential to be a 3-year, $9.5 million deal for Ruff starting now, and he's already been here for 2 years. So when all is said and done, Darin Ruff may end up being here for 5 seasons, and that's very much a good thing. I mean, he has become a fan favorite and just a really important player on this team. And then for Mike Yastrzemski, he's what we call a Super 2 player, meaning because he was in the top 22% of players in terms of service between 2 and 3 years of service, he gets kind of bumped up to have arbitration eligibility a year early. So this was his first of 4 arbitration years. Normally players only get 3. And he and the Giants reach a deal for 2022 for $3.7 million. And then the way arbitration works is that every year through arbitration, you generally get a raise. And so this puts him in line for likely $5+ million in 2023. And so it's a good deal for the player. This is why it's kind of important, when we see teams and players kind of haggling over what seems like small amounts of money, and they're generally underpaid. That's the way arbitration is that you're underpaid relative to what you would get on the free agent market. And then every year you get those raises as you move closer and closer to free agency. But you set a precedent. So if you start at $3.7 million and you're going to get a raise next time around, then that's why teams are kind of careful and can seem cheap when they're trying to set a lower precedent. But the projection by MLB Trade Rumors, I think Matt Swartz is the name of the guy at MLB Trade Rumors who does these projections, for Yaz was $3.1 million. So he comes in above that. The projection for Ruff for 2022 was, I think, $2.6 million. So both players get 2022 salaries above their projections. And I think that fans can be happy about that. The Giants, not really trying to be cheap with these two players, and these are solid deals for both of them. So I want to talk about kind of the numbers and what they mean to this Giants team. So, of course, Darin Ruf, he had a major league career with the Phillies from 2012 through 2016, and he was not very good. And then he ends up going to Korea for 3 seasons, and then the Giants bring him over back to the U.S. for the 2020 season, and he was still pre-arbitration eligible, so he came with a bunch of club control when they signed him. And the idea, when he was with the Phillies, he mashed left-handed pitching. So I think the idea was generally that he was going to be a platoon player against lefties for them. And what he has done, first of all, in his major league career at this point, in over 500 plate appearances against left-handed pitching in his MLB career, the dude has a 153 weighted runs created plus, .290 average, 383 on base, 557 slugging, 267 isolated power. Strikeout rate just 22.8%. He's been an absolute monster against left-handed pitching in his major league career. And if we look at what has he done against right-handed pitching in that major league career, only a 92 weighted runs created plus, so significantly worse. But the point is made that perhaps he's a different guy since coming back from Korea, and I don't think you can really argue with that all that much. So when we look at his Giants career, how about overall first? The overall numbers in his Giants career, 412 plate appearances, has a 143 weighted runs created plus, 272 average, 381 on base. These are robust kind of numbers. 519 slugging, a 246 isolated power. Those are very good numbers, but he spends most of his time playing against lefties. So in his Giants career against lefties, it's pretty much right in line with what he's done overall in his career against lefties. 275 average, 390 on base, 579 slugging, 157 weighted runs created plus, just a 20.5% strikeout rate. So this is where the rubber meets the road, though. The kind of key to look at for Darren Ruff is how does he do against right-handed pitching since coming to the Giants? Because this is where the Giants have the potential to get a very good player out of Darren Ruff as opposed to just kind of a role player. So against right-handed pitching, I've seen a lot of this so far today, people talking about this, and rightfully so. Darren Ruff against righties with the Giants, 270 average, 372 on base, 461 slugging. That is a 191 isolated power. So the on-base percentage is good. The isolated power is only slightly above league average, but he's been able to get on base, 13.5% walk rate. The issue that I see is that the strikeout rate is 32.9% against right-handed pitching in his Giants career. Again, against lefties, 20.5%. So I think the potential is there for him to be good against right-handed pitching, or at least above average or even close to average, and that you would take that. There's value in a guy who can crush lefties and can hold his own against righties. You don't really have to be great against both. If you're great against both, that's when you're like a very good player. And that's the question with Ruff. So he's been able to do that, but the strikeout rate, there's more swing and miss. There's more, presumably a little bit more chase against righties. But basically, regardless, we know he can crush left-handed pitching. And the fact that there's a designated hitter now in the National League, I think only adds to the value of a Darren Ruff, although he is kind of underrated defensively, I would say, in the outfield. He holds his own out there. I'm actually going to pull up, as I'm speaking here, the outs above average per StatCast, but I do know, I mean, just from watching him, you wouldn't think that he's going to be a very good defender given his size, but he actually moves pretty well. So according to defensive runs saved, he's been worth +1 defensive run saved with the Giants in the outfield since 2020, spanning about 350 innings. And at first base, he's been worth +2 defensive runs saved with the Giants in about 320 innings. So this guy has provided defensive value for the Giants, and you wouldn't necessarily know it given his size. People talk about him as a poor defender, but he's really not been. So according to outs above average, in the outfield, Darren Ruff -1 out above average with the Giants in the outfield in 2021 and -2 in 2020. So a combined -3 in, what did we say, 350 innings, 250 innings out there. Regardless, he's not killing you out there. And then at first base by outs above average, he's at +5 in his Giants career. So underrated defender. I don't know if he's underrated anymore as a hitter, but he shouldn't be because he's a difference-making offensive player. So it's a great deal. I don't even know if I said the terms. I apologize. It's a basically 2-year guarantee. It buys out his RBers for this year and next year, $3 million per year. And then there's a $3.5 million club option for the third season with a $250,000 buyout. So it's a $6.25 million guarantee for Darren Ruff. And I just personally couldn't be happier for him. He's a great guy, and he had to earn this. I mean, going to Korea, coming back, and then performing. So coming up next, we'll wrap up the conversation about Ruff. We'll turn our attention to Mike Yastrzemski, and then there's more I want to get to. I want to talk about the Giants' second base situation with La Stella dealing with an injury, and also talk about the televised game last night, highlights from Alex Wood, Luis Matos, and more. So stay tuned for that. But first, it's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we're going to talk about Mike Yastrzemski and his new deal with the Giants, what he means to the team and what this contract kind of sets him up for long term. And I also want to talk about the Giants' second base situation with Tommy La Stella dealing with an injury. What does that mean? Donovan Solano has signed with the Cincinnati Reds. So what is that situation going to look like heading into the season? Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. That show, Locked On MLB Prospects, is free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, couldn't be happier for Darren Ruff. He was able to put up 2.5 Fangraphs wins above replacement in just 312 plate appearances for the Giants in 2021, 16 home runs. He had an opportunity when Brandon Belt went down kind of early in the year to start against right-handed pitching, and he was doing well, and then he blew out his hamstring. And so I wouldn't be surprised if at some point throughout the course of 2022, then of course he's also here for 2023, and he may very well be here for 2024, he's probably going to get an opportunity at some point to be more of an everyday player, especially now with the DH and the National League. So I look forward to that. I do just want to throw a little bit of cold water on the notion that he's equally good against right-handed pitching. That strikeout rate being much higher is kind of a red flag, but I'd like to see him go out there and see if he can do it. And I think he'll get those opportunities this year, especially given that they didn't make major additions on the offensive end, only bringing in Jock Peterson. That kind of opens the door for more playing time for a guy like Darren Ruff. So yeah, let's now talk about Mike Yastrzemski, who gets this $3.7 million guarantee for 2022 through his first arbitration season. So it sets him up really nicely. And just like with Darren Ruff, I'm very happy for him because his story is one of perseverance. I mean, this guy battled it out in the minor leagues for so long. He broke into professional baseball in 2013 and didn't make his major league debut until 2019 after the Giants acquired him from the Orioles. And then being an older kind of rookie, he wasn't going to be eligible to start making some money for probably 3 seasons. But because he debuted relatively early in 2019, he achieves this Super 2 status. If he hadn't been a Super 2, if he had just a couple of weeks less Major League service, he wouldn't have been a Super 2, meaning he would have only been eligible to make the league minimum salary in 2022, and then he finally would have been arbitration eligible in 2023. The risk here is like if he gets hurt or if the performance tanks in 2022, nothing is guaranteed to him beyond that. And so it's a big deal for a guy like Yaz to get this payday. $3.7 million is life-changing money. I mean, and it sets him up well. Like if he can just stay on the field and stay relatively productive, he's in line for probably $5 million in 2023. And then you add that with the 3.7, you're talking, nearly $9 million. And then it just continues from there for 4 arbitration years, and then he reaches free agency. But the thing is, he's already 31. By the end of the season, he's going to be 32. And so that's why it's so important for him to kind of cash in now. So he deserves it. He's been kind of the heart and soul of this Giants team for the last 3 years. In 2019, his kind of bursting onto the scene and having some really big moments was a huge part of turning the mentality of this team around. Then he goes out there and has that MVP type season in 2020, granted, 54 games, 60 game season, but he got MVP votes and he was the best player on the team. Last year, it didn't go so well. He kind of regressed to being more of a league average offensive player, but he was a really good defensive right fielder, and he was a good base runner. So still put up 2.2 Fangraphs wins above replacement, which is roughly what a league average player does. So I think the hope was that he would be better than league average, but if you're getting league average production, as a floor, I think that you'll take that. So hopes are higher going into 2022. I don't think there's any doubt about it that he and the team and the fans are hoping for an improvement from Yastrzemski going into 2022. So just briefly to talk about his career kind of numbers at the major league level, he's been 26 points above league average by weighted runs created plus against right-handed pitching in his major league career. If you just look at the overall numbers, 21 points above league average. But against left-handed pitching, Yastrzemski has been, he's got a 108 weighted runs created plus. So he's held his own. This is kind of what we were talking about with Ruff. If you can hold your own against same-handed pitching and then be really good against opposite-handed pitching, that makes you a valuable player, especially when you can play really good defense. And Yastrzemski has been versatile. He can play center, he can play in the corners. And so there's a lot of value in that, and that's why the Giants felt compelled to retain him at this $3.7 million figure. It is a little bit surprising given that the projection by MLB Trade Rumors was for $3.1 million. Normally the Giants, when they do settle with players like this, they've ended up settling for figures that are less than the projection. So I was surprised to see it significantly higher. I need to confirm. We only have one person reporting that they reached that deal. It's possible that you could buy out multiple years and that's part of it. So we'll see. But for now, it looks like that's what it is. So against left-handed pitching, this is what I want to focus on just for a quick second. In the first couple years of Yastrzemski's career, he was able to do quite well against left-handed pitching. That was a big story coming out of 2020, the COVID-shortened season. The MVP type season from Yastrzemski, small sample, hard to say what would have happened over the course of a full year. But he had a 165 weighted runs created plus against left-handed pitching, 385 on base, 328 isolated power. Although we're talking about just 78 plate appearances. So a tiny sample, but it seemed that's a big part of why he seemed like a star player. But that's the thing about platoon splits in a small sample, is that we talk all the time about how they're not very reliable. And in fact, Yastrzemski's struggles against left-handed pitching are a huge reason why he took a big step back in 2021. He went to having a 46 weighted runs created plus against left-handed pitching, just a 254 on base and 259 slugging, a 089 isolated power. So just miserable numbers against lefties. But against righties last year, he maintained solidly above league average production, 328 on base, but a 278 isolated power. So it's a little bit of an above average on base percentage, but the power is just well above average against righties. So that's kind of the story with Yastrzemski. The takeaway for me mostly is that I'm just happy he gets this life-changing money, and it sets him up well if he can just stay, even at this level that he performed in 2021, he's in line for at least that much in 2022. If he struggles, though, that's when you become a non-tender candidate. So if the number is too high, then the team may non-tender you because your projection is for more than you're likely worth. And so I hope that he doesn't struggle in 2022. Otherwise, he could become a non-tender candidate. But if he can just be solid, then he'll likely continue to be back, and he's under club control for 4 seasons more, including 2022. So coming up next, I want to talk about the Giants' second base situation. And I also want to talk about a little bit from this game last night, Alex Wood looking really sharp and Luis Matos really making an impression on me with a couple of defensive plays. So stay tuned for that. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the exact same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Random example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store and just $216 from Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. You can buy the part from Rock Auto and then take it to your trusted mechanic or dealership or whatever and save a bunch of money by ordering the part yourself. It's really a no-brainer. I have done it myself multiple times. Go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about the Giants' second base situation and also a little bit from this game last night that was televised on NBC Sports Bay Area. I also want to point out, at the time of this recording, Curt Casali and Dom Leone still don't have, we haven't heard anything, but today was the deadline to exchange arbitration figures. So it's kind of a deadline forces action, and that's why we had this deal with Ruff and Yastrzemski. So we either have new deals for Casali and Leone for 2022 or we don't. And if we don't, it'll mean they've exchanged figures and that they're going to go to an arbitration hearing, argue their case, and then this panel is going to pick one or the other, and that'll be their 2022 salary. So it's kind of an awkward and negative thing to have to go through because the team basically goes in and argues why you're not worth what the player is asking for. So that's why we call it avoiding arbitration. So Yaz and Ruff avoided arbitration with these new deals. So you may know more. You probably know more than I do. At the time of this recording, we don't have any word on Leone and Casali, but just keep in mind that those are unsettled at the time of this recording. But they're both retainable. It's just a matter of how much they're going to be paid for 2022. So anyway, I want to talk about the Giants' second base situation a little bit. We can expand upon this more in the coming days as we are still almost 3 weeks away from opening day. But three things. I mean, number one, Tommy La Stella is rehabbing from offseason Achilles surgery. And the word is that he's not going to be ready for opening day, at least not quite. And the second thing is that we heard Farhan Zaidi, apparently, I didn't actually hear this, but there were reports that he said on the radio that they were looking at adding a second baseman because of this. So that's a little bit of a question for me because when I look at the free agent market at second base, it is a very grim list. You've got Jed Lowry, Jordy Mercer, Hernan Perez, Eric Sogard, and Joe Panik actually on the free agent market. Before some of you get too excited about Joe Panik, do not expect him to be back at all. I mean, he actually had a miserable 2021 season, and his playing days could be over. That's how bad of a year it was. So Joe Panik is not going to come back. Jed Lowry makes some sense. He's going to be 38 years old this season. Had a solid year with the Oakland A's in 2021, and could make some sense. He spent a lot of time in the Bay Area. So on a kind of minor league deal, maybe could make some sense for the Giants. But otherwise, this is kind of Thairo Estrada having a much bigger role in 2022. I sometimes forget the year. 2022, right? Yeah. So Thairo Estrada probably going to play a big role on this Giants team in 2022. And he figures to probably start the season as kind of an everyday guy at second base. But they do have Wilmer Flores kind of waiting in the wings. I don't know. I mean, yeah, Wilmer Flores can obviously play some second base, can also play first, can DH. So it's kind of a backup plan, but I would expect to see Thairo Estrada be given an opportunity. They apparently quite like him. Something I noticed when I was studying Kris Bryant's impact on the Giants in 2021 is that Thairo Estrada was basically just as valuable as Kris Bryant in about the same number of games. And the difference was Bryant had about 100 more plate appearances. So essentially what that means is that Thairo Estrada had more of an impact on the 2021 Giants than Kris Bryant did. Thairo Estrada had a 207 isolated power, 333 on base, 119 weighted runs created plus, and just kind of made an impact when he was on the field. And so, he's 26 years old. He's an athletic player, can move around, can play shortstop, can play some outfield. So expect to see him get a lot of opportunities in 2022, and it might start off right away with him being given a shot at second base while La Stella is out. Even when La Stella is back, I would expect Estrada to be the weak side of a platoon with La Stella in 2022. So I just wanted to point that out. We'll talk about that more, but it's something to watch. Like, do they make another addition for a veteran player like Lowry to kind of be a stopgap until La Stella is back? I haven't heard an exact projection about when to expect La Stella to be back. So anyway, lastly, the game last night, televised. My big takeaways, first of all, Alex Wood looked really, really sharp, working fast. Fastball looked good. Slider looked good. 2 innings, 3 strikeouts. I don't think he allowed any base runners. Game kind of got ugly late. A lot of minor leaguers coming in and an inability to throw strikes and just struggling generally. But Luis Matos made a couple of unreal plays in center field. I mean, the first one, just a full-on dive in a blowout game, really impressed me. I mean, the word about Matos is that he's a true center fielder, and I saw that last night. Haven't seen a lot of him play, but that was very impressive. Grant McCray hit a home run. Somebody else hit a home run. Will Toffey hit a home run. And otherwise, it was kind of an ugly game for the Giants late. But did want to point out Wood and Matos having kind of standout games. So we'll continue to talk about spring training games as they go on. Generally speaking, don't worry about the Giants' record. Don't worry if they're not getting a hit through 5 innings. Literally, that doesn't matter. So that's just the way it is, but it's fun when these games are televised. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Covered a lot of ground today. Coming up later in the week, we're going to continue talking about, I want to talk about the catcher position. I threw something out on Twitter, a little bit controversial, that Wilson Contreras in a trade could make some sense for the Giants because going into the year with Joey Bart as an unproven commodity is a little bit risky for a team in the Giants position expecting to win. So we'll get into that later in the week. We'll also do a mailbag. We still have mailbag questions from last week, so a lot of ground left to cover for the remainder of the week. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay locked on Giants.